The year was 1999, and the city lights of Los Angeles glimmered like scattered jewels against the velvet night sky. The entertainment industry was thriving, and among its brightest young stars were two child actresses, Emily and Sophie, who had captured the hearts of audiences with their natural charm and dazzling smiles. Both only 12 years old, they were best friends not just on the screen but off it as well, inseparable in a world that often devoured innocence too quickly. They had just wrapped up filming the latest episode of the television drama that had made them household names. As the cameras stopped rolling and the crew began packing up, the girls giggled and whispered to each other, brimming with the unshakable energy of youth, unaware of the shadows that were beginning to gather around them. Their driver, a middle-aged man assigned by the production company, waited outside the studio in a dark sedan. The girls waved goodbye to the cast and crew, clutching their small backpacks, and skipped toward the car. The driver gave a polite nod, opened the back door, and they climbed inside. It was just another late night of filming, nothing unusual, nothing to warn of what was about to happen. The ride was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the occasional bursts of laughter from the backseat. Sophie leaned her head against the window, staring at the blur of neon signs and shop lights flashing by, while Emily chatted about the scene they had just filmed, animated and full of dreams for the future. Neither of them noticed the way the driver's hands tightened on the steering wheel or how he kept glancing into the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. They were supposed to be dropped off near Emily's home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a place where porch lights glowed warmly and where parents often waited at the front steps for their children. But when the car rolled to a stop on the side of a dimly lit street just a few blocks away from the expected address, confusion flickered in Sophie's eyes. "This isn't the right spot," she murmured, her voice uncertain but polite. The driver's response was calm, almost rehearsed, something about traffic detours and it being quicker this way. Emily, trusting as always, didn't argue. She simply adjusted the strap of her backpack and waited for the car to stop completely. They stepped out together, two small figures silhouetted under a flickering streetlight, their laughter carrying faintly into the night. The car idled for a moment, then slowly pulled away, its red taillights shrinking into the distance. Minutes later, when Emily's parents checked the driveway and found it empty, their first thought was that filming had run late. But as the night stretched on with no sign of the girls, worry tightened its grip. Phone calls were made, friends contacted, the studio questioned. By midnight, panic had already taken hold. The police were notified, and within hours, the case of the missing child stars spread across the city like wildfire. News channels interrupted regular programming to broadcast their smiling faces, posters were printed overnight, and desperate pleas from their families flooded the airwaves. The nation watched, hearts breaking, as two young girls seemed to have vanished into thin air. The only clue came the following morning when officers scouring the area discovered Sophie's backpack lying on the side of a road several miles from where they were last seen. The zipper was broken, and its contents, an old diary, a hairbrush, and a charm bracelet, were scattered in the dirt as if dropped in haste. It was a chilling discovery that hinted at struggle but offered no clear answers. The media swarmed the site, cameras flashing as reporters speculated about kidnappers, stalkers, or even obsessed fans. Theories multiplied, but none brought the girls back. Days turned into weeks. Witness reports were inconsistent. Some claimed to have seen the girls walking near a gas station, others swore they spotted them at a bus depot. Each lead fizzled out as quickly as it came. The driver was questioned repeatedly but insisted he had followed instructions and dropped them where he always had. With no solid evidence, the case began to grow cold, swallowed by the shadows of unanswered questions. Emily and Sophie's smiling faces remained frozen in time, plastered across missing posters that slowly faded in the sun. By the end of that summer, hope had begun to wither. Families clung to fading photographs, police files grew thicker, and the entertainment world moved on with new faces, new stars. Yet for those who had known the girls, the memory of that night never dulled. The image of two children stepping out of a car, their futures ahead of them, only to be swallowed by the dark, leaving behind silence that would echo for years. 10 years had passed since the disappearance, but the world had not forgotten Emily and Sophie. Their faces, once plastered on every missing child poster and nightly news segment, had become a grim reminder of innocence lost. The case had gone cold, files gathering dust in police archives, while their families carried the invisible weight of grief that never eased. But for one person, the mystery still lingered like an unfinished sentence: Clara Jennings, a reporter who had once been on the front lines of the story. Clara had been young, ambitious, and fiercely determined back in 1999, her career on an upward trajectory. Covering the case of the missing child stars had been her breakthrough moment, a chance to prove herself as more than just another face behind a news desk. But as weeks turned into months with no answers, she became just another voice echoing the same speculations and recycled facts. The public lost interest, and so did her editors. Her once bright career dimmed as fresh scandals and newer headlines stole the spotlight. By 2009, Clara was no longer the rising star of investigative journalism she had dreamed of becoming. Instead, she was working for a small local paper, covering community events and petty crimes that barely made the back page. Her apartment mirrored her life, modest, cluttered with old notebooks, stacks of forgotten drafts, and the occasional unopened bill. On that particular afternoon, she returned home tired from another uneventful assignment, a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new grocery store. Dropping her purse by the door, she noticed a small, nondescript package sitting on her doormat. There was no return address, only her name scrawled in uneven letters across the front. At first, she thought nothing of it. Anonymous tips weren't uncommon in her line of work, though they usually came in the form of emails or hurried phone calls. Still, something about the weight of the box and the faint rattling inside stirred a flicker of curiosity. She carried it to her kitchen table, slid a knife carefully along the taped edges, and opened the flaps. Inside, cushioned in crumpled newspaper, was a small black plastic case, the kind used to store camcorder tapes in the 90s. Her brow furrowed. She pulled it out, brushed away the dust, and read the label stuck unevenly on its side. It was handwritten, faded from time, but still legible: 1999. For a moment, she just stared at it, her pulse quickening. The year jumped at her like a ghost from the past. The year Emily and Sophie vanished. She hadn't thought about them in months, maybe even years, but the tape in her hands dragged every buried memory back to the surface. The news conferences, the tearful pleas from the girls' parents, the frenzied search that ended in silence. Clara's hands trembled as she turned the tape over, inspecting it. Who had sent it? Why now, after 10 long years? She didn't own a camcorder anymore, technology had moved on, and high-8 tapes had become relics of another time. Yet her curiosity gnawed at her, relentless. She needed to see what was on it. She thought of a pawnshop down the street that often carried outdated electronics and decided she would go there first thing in the morning. For now, she placed the tape carefully on her desk, almost reverently, as if it were a fragile artifact. That night, Clara barely slept. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind swirling with questions. If the tape truly contained something connected to the girls, it could reignite the story that had slipped through her fingers. It could redeem her career. But more than that, it could offer answers that 2 grieving families had been waiting for over a decade to hear. When morning came, she wasted no time. The pawnshop smelled of old wood and dust, cluttered with forgotten gadgets. After some haggling, she walked out with a bulky, second-hand camcorder and a stack of blank VHS tapes just in case she needed to transfer the footage. By the time she returned home, her heart was racing. She sat at her desk, slid the high-8 tape into the camcorder with cautious hands, and pressed play. The machine whirred to life, its small screen flickering with static before an image began to form. Her breath caught in her throat. The grainy picture revealed a dimly lit room, and there, sitting side by side, were 2 young girls. Their faces were pale but unmistakable. Emily and Sophie. Clara leaned closer, her pulse hammering in her ears, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. 10 years of silence shattered in an instant. The girls were alive on that tape. Alive after the world had already buried their story. And then Clara realized, with a chill that swept down her spine, that whatever she was watching wasn't just a recording. It was a message. Someone had been holding onto it for a decade, waiting for the right time to deliver it, and that time was now. The tape crackled and hissed as the old camcorder struggled to play it, the screen flickering with bursts of static before stabilizing into a shaky, grainy picture. Clara leaned forward, her eyes wide, as the image came into focus. The room on the screen was small and dimly lit, its walls covered in faded, peeling wallpaper with patterns that looked decades old. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, its glow weak and uneven, casting long shadows that seemed to move with every shift of the camera. At first, there was only silence, broken by the faint hum of the tape itself. Then, two small figures appeared. Emily and Sophie sat side by side on the floor, their knees drawn up to their chests. They were unmistakable, those same wide eyes, those familiar faces frozen in the public's memory from magazine covers and missing posters. But they were different now. Their hair was disheveled, their clothes wrinkled, as if they had been worn for days. Fear lingered in their eyes, and though they were trying to whisper to each other, Clara could see the nervous way they kept glancing off camera, as though someone, or something, was just out of sight. Clara's heart pounded so hard it seemed to echo in her ears. Her hands trembled as she gripped the sides of the camcorder, unwilling to blink, terrified she might miss something important. Emily leaned closer to Sophie, her lips moving as she whispered something too faint for Clara to hear. Sophie's face crumpled, her small hands tightening around the bracelet she still wore, the same one that had been found in her abandoned backpack a decade earlier. Clara's breath caught. This was no hoax. This was real. Suddenly, the camera shifted. The picture jolted as though whoever was holding it had adjusted their grip. The angle widened, capturing more of the room. A door loomed in the background, its wood cracked and splintered, and for a moment, Clara thought she saw movement in the shadows behind it. The girls went silent, their eyes snapping toward the door in unison. A creaking sound filled the room, a long, slow groan of rusty hinges straining as the door began to open. The girls flinched, pressing closer together, their expressions a mix of dread and silent pleading. Clara leaned so close to the screen her breath fogged the glass, desperate to see who, or what, was about to appear. But the figure behind the door never came into full view. Only a shadow stretched across the floor, tall and distorted, swallowing the fragile outlines of the children. Emily whimpered, her voice finally audible through the static. "Please, don't." The tape glitched then, warping the sound and distorting the picture. The screen filled with streaks of gray and white, the images twisting as though the machine was choking on the very memory it was trying to play. Clara frantically tapped the side of the camcorder, begging it to hold on, to show her more. For a brief second, the image returned, the girls looking directly into the camera now, their faces pale, their eyes wide with something deeper than fear. It was as if they were trying to speak to whoever was watching, as if they knew this recording was their only chance to be seen. Then, without warning, the screen went black. Clara froze, her chest heaving as she sat in the silence that followed. The whir of the camcorder was the only sound in the room, its tape spinning to the end before clicking to a stop. She stared at the blank screen, her mind racing, her skin prickling with goosebumps. That was it. No explanation, no answers, just a terrifying glimpse into a moment that had been hidden for a decade. She replayed it again and again, each time hoping for more, each time praying the static might clear to reveal some overlooked detail. She studied the wallpaper, the creaking ceiling fan barely visible in the corner, the scratches etched into the wood near the door. Every frame seemed heavy with secrets. Every flicker of shadow could be a clue. And yet, the most haunting detail remained the same, the look in the girl's eyes. That desperate, knowing stare as if they were reaching through the years, begging her, the watcher, the stranger, to understand. To find them. Clara's throat tightened. She had reported on countless tragedies, interviewed grieving families, and sat through press conferences where hope dwindled into silence. But she had never felt the weight of something like this. This was evidence. Proof. Someone had held onto this tape for 10 long years, waiting to send it, waiting for someone like her to receive it. But why her? Why now? She set the camcorder down carefully, her palms slick with sweat. The tape lay heavy in her mind, its images burned into her memory. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself, even if no one believed her. The authorities had written the case off as unsolvable, a relic of the past. But Clara could feel it, this was just the beginning. Clara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the flickering images of Emily and Sophie flashed in her mind, their pale faces, the tremor in Emily's voice, the shadow looming in the doorway. By morning, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but determination burned even brighter. She had something real, something that mattered, and she couldn't let it slip away. She tucked the tape into her bag and drove straight to the police station, her heart hammering as she rehearsed what she would say. The officer at the front desk looked up with bored eyes when she approached. Clara introduced herself quickly, explained she had evidence related to the 1999 missing actress's case, and asked to speak with someone from Cold Cases. The officer's brow rose, but instead of urgency, Clara saw only skepticism. After what felt like an eternity, a detective finally appeared, middle-aged, weary, with a coffee stain on his tie. Clara handed him the tape, recounting every detail about how it had arrived and what it contained. He listened, his expression neutral, before letting out a sigh. "Ma'am, we've had a lot of people send in fake leads over the years. Old tapes, doctored footage, you name it. These cases attract attention seekers." Clara bristled. "This isn't fake. I saw them. It's Emily and Sophie, clear as day. They're in a room, terrified, and someone else is there with them. You have to take this seriously." The detective nodded politely but without conviction. "We'll take a look, but no promises. Technology's come a long way since the 90s, it's not hard to make something look convincing. I'd advise you not to get your hopes up." Frustration boiled inside her. 10 years ago, she had watched this same disinterest swallow the case, and now it was happening again. The detective placed the tape on his cluttered desk like it was nothing more than junk mail. Clara knew then that if she left it to them, the truth would die in a file cabinet. She needed to take control. She snatched the tape back before he could stop her, mumbling a curt, "Thank you for your time," and stormed out. Her chest heaved with anger, but beneath it was something sharper, resolve. If no one else would fight for Emily and Sophie, she would. Back at her apartment, she dug out a box of old notes from when she had first covered the case. Newspaper clippings, interviews, maps marked with circles and scribbled arrows, it was all there, forgotten in the corner of her closet. She spread everything across her living room floor, the papers forming a chaotic mosaic of tragedy. She replayed the tape once more, pausing at every frame, comparing what she saw to her notes. The wallpaper caught her attention first, faded, patterned with tiny yellow flowers. It seemed familiar. She dug through her old photos until she found one from a police report she'd covered years earlier. It showed an abandoned farmhouse that had once belonged to a reclusive man with a history of mental illness. The case had been unrelated, but Clara remembered visiting the property, the wallpaper peeling in every room. Her stomach tightened. Could it be the same place? She zoomed in on the tape's frame, studying the details. The ceiling fan hanging slightly askew, the uneven floorboards, the door with deep scratches near the handle. Every detail screamed of neglect, of a house forgotten. And yet, it wasn't forgotten, not completely. Driven by instinct, Clara called one of her old contacts, a retired cameraman who had covered the case with her in 1999. He remembered the farmhouse too and confirmed its location at the edge of town, just past a stretch of overgrown farmland. "But it's been empty for years," he said cautiously. "No one goes near it. Locals say it's cursed." Clara felt a chill crawl up her spine, but fear couldn't outweigh the pull of the truth. If the farmhouse was connected, if the tape had been filmed there, then it could hold the answers everyone had missed. She decided she would see it for herself. That evening, she drove past the city limits, her car cutting through winding roads lined with skeletal trees. The farmhouse appeared on the horizon like something out of a nightmare, its roof sagging, its windows dark and hollow, the fields around it choked with weeds. She parked a short distance away, her pulse thundering in her ears. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at the decaying structure, the weight of what she was about to do pressing down on her. This wasn't just about a story anymore. It was about two girls who had vanished without justice, whose faces still haunted the memories of everyone who had ever seen them smile on screen. Clara gripped the steering wheel tighter, then released it, her hands slick with sweat. She finally stepped out, the cold air biting against her skin. The farmhouse loomed larger with each step, its silence oppressive, as though the land itself remembered what had once happened here. The door was slightly ajar, creaking faintly in the wind. Clara's breath hitched. She pulled out her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, and whispered to herself, "This is where it starts." She didn't know yet what she would find inside, but she knew one thing with certainty: the tape had not been a dead end. It was a beginning. The farmhouse stood like a skeleton against the fading evening light, its roof sagging and its windows like hollow eyes watching Clara approach. The closer she got, the heavier the silence felt, as though the air itself had thickened with secrets. Every instinct told her to turn back, but she pushed forward, flashlight in hand, heart pounding like a war drum inside her chest. The wooden porch groaned beneath her weight, each step threatening to give way. When she reached the door, she saw it was already slightly open, swaying with a low creak in the wind. Clara hesitated, her breath quick and shallow. The images from the tape surged back into her mind. The peeling wallpaper, the dim light, the door with scratches gouged deep into the wood. She was standing at the threshold of the very place that had swallowed Emily and Sophie 10 years ago. Gathering what courage she could, she pressed the door open and stepped inside. The stench of rot and mildew hit her instantly, thick and suffocating. Dust danced in the beam of her flashlight as it cut through the dark. The floorboards were warped, the furniture covered in yellowing sheets, as though time had stopped here long ago. But it wasn't just the decay that unsettled her, it was the sense of intrusion, of walking into a place that had witnessed horrors no one had ever uncovered. She moved slowly, sweeping the flashlight across the walls. The wallpaper, faded with its tiny yellow flowers, was the same as in the tape. Her heart lurched. She trailed the light toward the ceiling, where a crooked fan hung by a single loose screw, swaying ever so slightly. Every detail matched. She was standing inside the room where the girls had been filmed. On the far wall, her light caught something that made her throat tighten. Scratches, faint but unmistakable, carved into the wood around the doorframe. Desperate, uneven marks as though someone had clawed at it in panic. Clara's knees weakened, and for a moment she had to steady herself against the wall. She imagined Emily's small hands, Sophie's frightened face, the sound of that creaking door from the tape. The reality of what had happened here pressed down on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake off. She continued deeper into the house, her footsteps soft but echoing too loudly in the stillness. In the kitchen, a rusted sink was filled with stagnant water. In the living room, broken toys and old newspapers lay scattered on the floor, relics that didn't belong in an abandoned farmhouse. Clara crouched to examine them, her light revealing a child's doll with one eye missing, its porcelain face cracked down the middle. Her stomach churned. These weren't just forgotten belongings. They were left behind by someone. Her flashlight beam caught a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The basement. A chill swept over her as she remembered the way the girls had looked at the camera, pleading silently. Clara swallowed hard and forced herself forward, each creaking step a battle against the fear clawing at her insides. The smell grew stronger as she descended, dampness mixed with something metallic, something that clung to the back of her throat. At the bottom, the beam of her light revealed a small concrete room. The walls were covered in more scratches, but these were deeper, longer, some forming desperate words half carved, half erased by time. Her hands shook as she traced one faint word with her fingers: help. In the corner of the basement sat a rusted bed frame, its mattress stained and sagging. A length of broken chain dangled from the wall nearby. Clara's breath caught, and she staggered back, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't just a place of hiding. It had been a prison. Her light swept across the room again, landing on a small pile in the opposite corner. She hesitated before approaching. On the ground were tiny shoes, long since coated in dust, and beside them a cracked hairbrush tangled with strands of blonde hair. Clara's vision blurred with tears as she crouched, her hands trembling as she picked up the brush. It was Sophie's. She had seen it in photographs from the case files. Her mind reeled. This was the proof, undeniable and chilling, that the girls had been kept here long after the world had stopped searching. The tape hadn't been a fabrication. The farmhouse was their prison. But before Clara could absorb the enormity of the discovery, a sound cut through the silence. Footsteps. They came from above, deliberate and heavy, echoing through the hollow house. Clara froze, every muscle in her body tightening, her flashlight shaking in her grip. Someone was here. Her car was parked down the road, hidden, but somehow she knew she wasn't alone. Whoever had once lived in this house, maybe they had never really left. The footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs with a slow, measured rhythm. Clara's breath quickened, panic clawing at her throat. She stumbled backward into the shadows of the basement, clutching Sophie's brush to her chest. The beam of her flashlight wavered across the walls before she quickly switched it off, plunging the room into darkness. Her heart hammered in the silence as the old wooden steps groaned under the weight of someone approaching. The basement door creaked open, spilling in a sliver of light from above. Clara pressed herself against the cold wall, her entire body trembling. She had come here looking for answers, but now she feared she might not make it out alive to tell anyone what she had found.